Hi, everyone. My name is Josh. I'm here to talk to you today about trust and the essential elements of having trust on your team. I'm going to put a little bit of focus on trust for agile teams as well. So I believe some of our attendees work on agile teams, and I think it'd be important to cover. But a little bit about me. So I am, as you can see from the slide, a personal development coach. I work one-on-one with people developing themselves. I'm also a SAFe certified Scrum Master um, and work with a few teams in that capacity. And yeah, love the world of Scrum. I'm also a Myers-Briggs certified facilitator. So if you ever want to know what your type is and explore what that means, that's what I do. I do that both on the individual level and also for groups. I'm really interested specifically in kind of the interactions of people's different strengths and how they can discover how to work best together. And lastly, I'm a game master. That's specifically in the world of something called a tabletop role-playing game. But essentially, I lead people through role-play exercises and experiences. It's a little bit like theater. It's a little bit like improv. It's a little bit like Yahtzee. But yeah, I use that in a couple of capacities to kind of bring my teams together when we have the opportunity to do it. So that is who I am, and I'm here with Expium, a Valiantis company. We are consultants in the world of Jira. We can help you with Jira Service Management, with Confluence, and pretty much anything in the Atlassian suite of products. We consult companies big and small in their ability to use those products. What I specifically care about is trust, but I find that pairs very well. If an organization is well structured and they have good interpersonal dynamics, they can go very, very far. So I'm interested in where the two things intersect, and it's why I work here at XPM and do the work that I do to a large degree. So XPM consults on the use of Jira products as well as agile transformations and how to fully take your company into the agile world. So that's what we do. We work with Atlassian, we're one of their platinum solution partners. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about that. It's one of my favorite things. But yeah, let's get started. So this is our office here. XBM's office is in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been there a couple times. I am a remote employee, but as you can see, my background behind me is I'm in the office. Anyway, so this is our office, and I wanted to talk a little bit about like why we discovered that kind of like team building and trust building, specifically remotely, was really crucial, and a little bit about the journey that we took to get there. It has not. Someone very close to me, my cousin, always tells me that progress is not a straight line. So I'll tell you a story about that. So when we, as XBM, were a company in 2020, trying to remember, years are weird, but we were working in this office and collaborating a lot, helping people get the most out of their Jira instances and innovating and becoming a great partner with Atlassian. And we had this really good work culture that we were proud of. That table you can kind of see there on the right is where we would do lunch. And it was just like a really special part of the day that the whole company of 50 some odd folks would go and do lunch together. And it felt good. It felt like you knew everyone, or you could bond with whoever you wanted. And there was also just time to kind of be a person with everyone else. Everything wasn't always about work all the time. So sometimes we'd talk about, I don't know, like we talk about work. Sometimes we're talking about personal stuff. Sometimes we're talking about, hobbies, whatever, anything. And that was really important to us. And then the pandemic happened, and that threw a wrench in that. A lot of the relationships that we had that were going on at work started to sort of dissipate and break down because people didn't have that sort of water cooler space to connect with each other. And it was really tough because there was this feeling of like a lack of communication that was happening, and people who had friendships before started to drift apart. And when people would connect, we would often only talk about work. And it just didn't have that same feeling of fluidity. And even with the new people that we started to bring on as we're hiring folks, they had no idea what our culture was even like when we were all together. So there was a feeling that something had to change. So we started to look at the literature, and we read this book that had been going around the office before, but we never really felt like we needed, which is The Five Dysfunctions of a Team. The Five Dysfunctions of a Team is a great book, period. It would be a great fiction book, even without the insights it has to offer about teams and team management. It's basically the story of a C-suite of executives that are highly dysfunctional, which is entirely fictional, and I know does not actually happen in the real world. But if you'll run with me, the C-suite is not cooperating. Their meetings are very tense, and it's the story of a CEO who gets brought on named Catherine, whose job it is to kind of like take them and build them into an actual successful team. And it's riveting. It's actually really good kind of drama. But at the crucial moment in the book, she starts to unload this triangle pyramid that you see here of like, what are the dysfunctions that she's seeing on this team and that hold teams back. So we were really curious, like, how do these apply to us? How can we like make more of this in our work environment, even though we're all remote and it doesn't feel the same as it did before? So we're like reading this and studying it. And the dysfunctions are kind of built on each other from the bottom up. You have the absence of trust at the bottom. And then when there is trust, you can start to approach the fear of conflict when there's, et cetera. So you kind of follow it all the way up. But trust was the key thing that we were looking at, because if people didn't really know each other, it seemed like they didn't really trust each other. You didn't feel as comfortable with folks. And if you're not as comfortable with folks being open with them or discussing or feeling like they know you as a person, it became a lot harder to do the other things, to talk, to have difficult conversations, to trust that when they have something critical to say about what you're doing, that it's coming from a good place and not a bad place. The trust was a really key one, because without that, it's difficult to have productive conversations with people. They don't trust you. You don't trust them. There's tension. There's politics involved. You might go around each other's backs. There's a lot of stuff that could happen. And it's all very normal and natural and human. It's not something anyone wants to do necessarily. It just comes out of fear and not being sure, what to do. So that was what we kind of came to as something really critical that we wanted to focus on. When we did it, and we were clear that doing so wouldn't just like feel good for our company, but if we could find a way to recreate that trust, it would recreate the environment of collaboration, productive discussion, and kind of like the ability to challenge each other that felt a lot easier when we were all together. So there's this really awesome quote from the book that I love, which is when, the CEO, Catherine, has gathered all of the C-suite together for their first big offsite. And a lot of them don't want to be there. They were like, well, why are we here? We should be working with customers. This is a waste of our time. Some people, not all of them. And she walks in the boardroom that morning as they're all sitting there around the table. And she sits down. She says this. She says, we have a more experienced and talented executive team than any of our competitors. We have more cash than they do. Thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology, and we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet in spite of all that, we are behind two of our competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth. Can anyone here tell me why that is? Silence. And that silence is really telling. Because if they were a team that trusted each other, they could jump in and say that. But because there's all this sort of like unspoken blame and disagreement and avoidance of conflict that existed at the table, nobody could actually address the question, of why they were behind their competitors. And that's the key. Trust lets you engage in productive conflict and start to do all those other things. So we believe that teamwork is the ultimate competitive advantage. Certainly, agile processes and Atlassian's tools value teamwork very highly. If you're on a Scrum team, you know that having a self-directed and empowered team is critical for your ability to succeed as a unit and for the whole company to succeed. That in fact, the best agile in its kind of most ideal manifestation is one where you can hand something off to someone else and not look at it, not do any oversight, and totally trust that them and their team are going to be able to deliver what you need. And if they're not, you're going to have visibility, you're going to have communication, you're going to know that it's possible. It's actually a great quote that I'm going to take a moment and see if I can find about agile and trust. Hold on one second. I just found this the other day and I want to make sure that here it is. So I was reading some of Atlassian's documentation, and they said that agile processes cannot function without a high level of trust among team members, and therefore using agile processes create trust because it's not going to work without it. It requires candor to have difficult conversations regarding what's right for the program and the product. Because conversations happen at regular intervals, ideas and concerns are regularly expressed. That means team members need to be confident in each other's ability and willingness to execute on the decisions made during those conversations. Yeah. So teamwork is a huge competitive advantage. It's our ability to collaborate with each other and everything. So at any rate, this was all fairly obvious to us. And might be obvious to you as well. So the question is, well, what can we do about that? Well, we looked at a couple of different solutions. We started doing a lot of the things that people would typically do. Trivia, Zoom happy hours. We'd even do talks where we would have, someone come up and talk on a topic. And those worked okay. Those started to get more engagement and people understanding each other. But none of that quite replicated what we had before. And so we ended up finding two solutions that did do what we wanted them to. And that was Myers-Briggs, using personality and having people be able to talk and share about themselves, and then also using games and role play. And I'll talk more about those later on in the conversation. But that started to take our culture from one where we felt distant and unconnected to each other to one where we genuinely felt that we understood each other. Before I go on, though, I do want to talk about the cost of a lack of trust, because I've talked about the benefits of it, but in case you're not aware, so a lack of trust can cause a lot of breakdowns and bottlenecks, and it can be something really difficult to address. When we're doing an agile transformation, we can put new processes into place. When we're putting a Jira instance together, we can put systems in ways that we expect work to be done. But fundamentally, there can be bottlenecks that exist in relationship between people. And poor communication or a lack of trust is going to it's going to exacerbate problems, and it's going to cause things to become slower and more difficult to execute on, because people are going to want to double check each other's work. They're going to feel frustrated with one another. They're going to try and do everything themselves, that kind of lone wolf mentality of I can't trust everyone, so I might as well do it myself. And that means they're probably not going to communicate with each other, which is going to cause breakdowns in other areas. So as a story example, you can imagine a senior consultant training a junior consultant, and they're splitting up the work that they're going to do for a client. And the junior consultant says yes to everything the senior consultant asked them to do. And the senior consultant is is very clear that they're like, all right, great, good luck, go do it. And they both go off in their silos and do their work. So Google did this great thing called the Aristotle Project, where they found that psychological safety was like a key indicator of a team's performance. One of those is the ability to ask for help. So you could imagine this junior consultant might feel afraid or intimidated, not fully trust that they're safe with the senior consultant, and so might not say, "Hey, like I'm not sure if I can get all this work done. Like I don't know how to do this." They might be afraid to say that for fear of losing their job, it reflecting poorly on them. And so they might take on too much work, and therefore they don't get the senior consultant what they need at the time that they need it. This could upset the senior consultant and feel like, well, I couldn't trust them anyway. They might get angry and anxious that they won't get what they need out to the client, and go to potentially confront the junior consultant or think badly about them and not trust them in the future. It could create all these problems that could really be disastrous for the team's ability to collaborate and work together, and ultimately be very hard to repair between the two of them as they would slowly work towards making apologies and dealing with the fallout and venting to their other colleagues or what have you. We think that the solution is, if there is an environment where people are empathetic and they're compassionate and they're open, which is something we really try to train for and look for when we hire, then the conversation could go very differently. Either the junior consultant could own up to that this seems like a lot of work and they might not be ready for it, and then the team could work together. Or the senior consultant could say something like, hey, look, it makes me really anxious if I can't get the work out by 3 p.m. tomorrow to the client, or whatever time. So if there's any of this you can't do, let me know. That way the senior consultant, the person in power, is kind of opening the door to let the junior one know, hey, it's okay to be vulnerable and tell me you can't do this, or you can't accomplish this. Like, just let me know. I'd rather that we're both on the same page and working to solve something together than adversaries. And that starts to build the conversation of trust. And in fact, in the real life example that I drew this story from, that's exactly what the senior consultant did. This hypothetical situation never happened. They just started the conversation saying like, hey, if there's anything you can't do, let me know. I'll take it off your plate. And it made it so that the client got what they needed and the relationship was maintained. All right. So how can we help people be able to open up about who they are and understand their preferences? We asked this question, and we went to this. It's one of the most popular personality types, profiling systems in the world, and it's really exciting when you get a bunch of people who are willing to sit and open up and talk about themselves and who they are and what makes them unique. And it starts to build bridges so that people can know. And it also is a nice structured format that works really well on Zoom, where a group of people can all get together and open up, and there's a facilitator who leads you through a conversation, and you start to learn who people are as people, who they've been throughout their lives and their childhood as they've grown up, why they're drawn to the career that they're drawn to. All of these things can show up when you're looking at someone's personality type in their profile, because who we are and what brings us joy comes from something within us, something that maybe we were born with, maybe we learned when we were young, but all of us have certain strengths and skills that we're specifically drawn to. And that's what the personality system is kind of looking at, is what are your unique skills. Now, this is not to say that people can't do stuff that's outside of what they most enjoy, or their kind of their zone of genius is a great word for it. But just like, can we be sensitive to the kind of work that people most enjoy doing and how they most enjoy doing it? And this opens up the conversation. So I became a facilitator in that time during the pandemic. And it was a real joy to be able to work with teams and watch people open up. I will say, most people love to talk about themselves. So this is a terrific It's a terrific exercise in that sense. Because you get to explore for yourself. You also get to see who on the team have similar types to you, who have different ones, and start to learn some tools for being able to interact with each other. So the quote here at the bottom, the differences between people are not random. Instead, they fall into different patterns or types. That's kind of the theory between the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. These are the different types. So I would show this slide when I was working with a group. And it was really fun as I would sort of show them. And these are called preference pairs. And that phrase, man, there's a lawn blower in the background. I hope that that's not distracting anyone. I'm going to check my messages. No, we're good. Okay. If that's distracting you, let me know. But at any rate, there are these 4 different preference pairs that exist. And most people will prefer one over the other. And so it's this fun thing as I describe kind of extroversion and introversion, for example, and asking people, hey, so which of these do you find that you prefer? For people to kind of open up about it. And everyone does everything. I mean, when we're talking about preferences, an introverted person might be like, yeah, I really enjoy being at home on the weekends. I really like my books. However, I know that at meetings, I have to be able to speak up and say my opinion. So that's something I can do. And also, I'm really good with people. So I often find that I am talking a lot and being extroverted. But at the end of the day, if there were no expectations on me, I would prefer to be introverted most of the time. So that's kind of how it is with all of them. Basically, when I run one of these sessions, I would go through what these mean and have people start to talk, and that gets them to open up. And when people do, and they share who they are, it's so much easier to see what brings them joy and how you can communicate with them, what you can pitch to them that's going to make the most sense. I often think about it as like learning another language. I mean, you're both speaking English, but learning someone who has a different preference to you, if you can understand how they see the world and what things mean to them and realize that it's not the same as you, you can start to have more productive conversations. So yeah. Another thing that I like about this is that the basic way that most of us have interacted with Myers-Briggs, if we have, is probably you took a test online, or you probably took a test, and then you got your results, and you're like, great, cool, these are my results. All right, what's next? And the way that I learned how to do this, being trained with the Myers-Briggs Foundation, is that you can give people a test. However, you don't show folks the results of their test. First, you all get into the room together after everyone's taken the test, and you go through the theory of each. And as you go through each one, you put people in breakout rooms and give them time to discuss and digest which one they are and what it means and who each other are. And you get that kind of like laughter of recognition and understanding, and people start to tell stories about themselves. We use breakout rooms and paired sharing a lot. And then at the end of this really productive and fun discussion, then I show people their indicator results. And I ask them to contrast what the test said with what they kind of discovered through the conversation they said. And often the test is wrong, because people, it's just a test. It's not fully infallible. But B, when we're taking these tests, we're often taking them and putting in the answers that we think possibly that the person on the other end of the test would want to see, or we're only thinking about ourselves in a work context, not who we would be if we could just be anyone or do anything with our lives. And so people often find that they kind of misidentified themselves, and having the time for discussion and sharing and stories and all that makes it very clear usually to people who they are, and they start to see who they really are, which can be a totally beautiful thing. And then they'll choose their best fit type based on, they'll either choose yeah, they'll choose what type they think is the best fit. And then I'll give them a breakdown sheet, give them some time to read it, and we'll talk through that. And that's a good place to start talking about strengths and weaknesses. After we've created some empathy and some understanding, we can talk about what people are really good at and what they might struggle with. And that also builds trust. You realize that people are, that others might struggle with things that are very natural for you. And so instead of blaming them and being like, well, they must be lazy, or they must just not be smart, or they must not whatever, you build a bridge. Now, this is assuming that people are actually competent. The test does not measure competency, but dollars to donuts, the people that you're working with are competent and are good enough at their job and capable of it. They might just approach it in a different way and might have certain blind spots. And this helps have compassion for those blind spots. And then a team can kind of rally around and figure out ways to compensate for what that is. And that group discussion can also be incredibly productive. And they'll walk out of it with kind of a sheet of like, here's all the things that I think are like changed. So we started doing that with our teams at Expium, and it was unbelievable. A, it was incredibly fun, but B, people became friends so much more quickly. They're messaging each other, finding shared interests. People started to hang out, and like the couple people even flew. I mean, they were on work trips, but they still kind of like flew and made time to spend time together when they were in the same place, which was just really touching. And I think kind of what it's designed and is a key indicator of trust, that you actually enjoy being with the people. And that started to make it so that they could have more open discussions, more productive discussions as a team. So yeah, that was what we saw happen with Myers-Briggs. Now, I want to take you through an exercise and let you discover which one of these you are. So this is just one of the preference pairs. As I go through and tell you this theory, I want you to think which one you feel might be true for you, which one you might prefer if there were no expectations or nothing else, if you were just living your best life, which one sounds more like you. You could also think about yourself in childhood potential. So on the left side, we have the orange circle with the arrows that are kind of bouncing off the outside. That's extroversion. With extroversion, there tends to be people who tend to act before they think. They're much more comfortable in the outside world, taking actions and learning through doing is a great one. They would prefer it that way as well. Just get me in, let me get dirty, let me mix it up. That's where I'm going to do my best work. There's also, they'll love to talk things through. I think this is really special. I think that some people in conversation will be talking with folks. You might be one of these people. And then through the conversation, you can feel yourself getting more energized. You can feel, if you're like me, you might feel your heart swelling, or you might just feel excited through the conversation as what someone else says triggers an idea for you. And then you spill out another idea, and then they feed you. And it's this really great feedback cycle where you're gathering a lot of energy from that conversation. It's almost like you're smarter when you're in conversation. And I often say extroverts don't know what they're thinking until they say it. If you're someone like that, you'll know because you'll have that experience a lot. And yeah, and you'll be more expressive too when interacting. You'll want to share. There's going to be more body language, and you're going to like it when you get body language from others. You're going to like it when other people are expressive because that tells you they're energized in the same way that you are. And that all looks like gaining energy from interactions. And then you'll tend to have a breadth of interests, be able to move from one thing to another, exploring all these different possibilities and things that you like to do. So that is what a preference for extroversion looks like. The flip side, by the way, of being that is that if you don't have those things, if you have people who are closed off, or there's a lot of time spent in quiet contemplation or alone, that can be very draining. That might be a place where you lose energy, you become phased out, your thoughts aren't very clear. It can be difficult for an extrovert to be in that kind of an environment, and it can be really demotivating. So that's something to be aware of in your team dynamics and for yourself if you're preference for extroversion. On the other side, you see the blue circle that has the arrows, but they're all bouncing from within. This is someone who prefers to think before they're acting. They have an inner world that is much clearer, that is much richer than their extroverted companions. And they'll spend time on reflection. Things like reading are very productive. Things like coding can also be very productive. Listening to music and decomposing it in your mind, writing stories, doing math. Many people, there's many interests as you can have as there are people out in the world and things to do. But it's those things that exist in the land of reflection in the inner world that really draw an introvert. They'll prefer to think things through as well. Consider what they might do before taking action. And because there's so much clarity on the inside, that makes sense. They'll also be more contained during an interaction or a meeting. They may appear more withdrawn to others because there's not that same need to express themselves and participate. And they're going to be focusing on that inner world, so it's a little bit less connected to what's going on the outside. The energy that comes is from concentrating, from working through their concepts or their reflections, and their interests will tend to be very deep, but there'll be fewer of them. I've often heard people with introversion say that when they do have to talk, that it takes energy because it's almost like two different muscles. Like there's the inner muscle of reflection, and there's the outer muscle of communication. And you might find yourself introverted if talking and communicating everything that's on the inside feels like it takes work to you. Now, it's not to say that you don't have important things to say. It often just means that when you do say something, it's something worth spending the energy to say. And what could motivate you for that depends on who you are. Maybe you're trying to make a better product. Maybe you care about someone. You want to let them know you love them. Maybe you're just passionate about whatever subject is being talked about. And so it's worth inserting yourself. But that is the difference. So with all that said, and after you've had some time to reflect, I would love it if you would put into our chat right now which one of these comes up for you. And why you think you prefer that one. Maybe say what it's like that makes you tell that you can do that. This is pretty much my favorite part because it's when people start to share, and then you can have all these great discussions as people, share who they are, and it's fun. It's just fun to learn about each other. So put that in. It'll go in the Q&A chat, so only I'll be able to see it. But at the end of this call, I'll check and I'll read those out and we'll check them out. But yeah, please share if you're listening. It's really cool to hear what people think. And lastly, I just want to share a story that happened because of this that really made a difference for our team. So my team had some conflict going on it for a while, just people who were not quite getting along, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. People would come and kind of complain to me about other team members, and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. And because of the work that we did here, one of our team members realized, kind of after the fact and after I had a conversation with her, that she was introverted. And that one of the most difficult things for her was being in the group, and when everyone get very expressive and would talk over her, and she would have these things that she wanted to contribute that she felt like she couldn't, like the conversation would move on too quickly and we'd never come back to it. And it ultimately led her to feel ignored, and led to some really negative feelings, like a spiraling in some cases, feeling like I'm not important. I don't even know why I'm on this team, kind of thing. And so I encouraged her to share that with the team at our, not at our stand-up, our retrospective. And she did. And she owned it really powerfully and said, it's not anything against you, but I can go into these spirals and our topics move on so quickly and I don't feel like I can contribute. And I just really feel like I have something to offer, and it doesn't get heard. That was really scary for her. And then I watched as the rest of the team, like, it dawned on them, like they just weren't aware that this had been going on for her. And as I had hoped, everyone came around her with a lot of compassion and told her that they would make it a part of their working agreement that we make space for her and anyone else who's quiet to speak and get their voice heard throughout the course of it. And for one, that's great for the mental health of one of my team members. Like, I really value that in itself, but she is brilliant and her contributions make a huge difference to it's a more creative team that I work with, but they change the course of our decision making. And I'm so glad that it feels free to offer her opinion, because it makes meetings really fun. She's funny. And what she does produces a better product for us. And the fact that we now have an environment where she can feel safe and contribute, that has made a huge difference. So that was probably the biggest benefit I saw with that one. Next thing I want to talk about that we ended up using was tabletop role-playing games. This is kind of just something I was passionate about and wanted to bring to our company, and they let me. Very happy about that. So tabletop role-playing games. Well, here you can see two spacemen. They're rolling some dice. There's some people on Zoom next to them. But essentially, it is a storytelling game. A lot of famous actors, you'll notice a lot of actors and performers really like this, but also some sports people. So these are all famous people who play Dungeons and Dragons. Tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons is the most popular and the first tabletop role-playing game ever to exist. There are tons of permutations. It was started in the 70s, but anyway, it was the first. These are famous people who have played Dungeons and Dragons. You can actually find online, if you go to YouTube, you can see Vin Diesel playing Dungeons and Dragons. You can see, oh God, bottom right. He did Clerks. His name is escaping me. You can put his name in the chat. Help me out here. Will something. Anyway, you can see him playing live. Felicia Day, Stephen Colbert is also on YouTube playing. And Jack Black also recently. So if you're curious, seeing one of your favorite celebrities playing it, but it's an improv game. It's a storytelling game, which I think is why people love it and are drawn to it and want to experience it. And the way that it works is you're either a player or you're the dungeon master, which is kind of the master of ceremonies or the facilitator of it, which is the role that I take. But each player gets to come up with a character that they play in a fantasy world, and the dungeon master is the narrator. They're the adjudicator of the rules. They're like the I don't want to say the villain, although they do play the villains in the story, but they're the ones who bring it to life, who give you a world to adventure in and conflicts to go up against. And they set the tone. You can do anything from like a high fantasy story like Tolkien, but there are plenty of other ways to do this too, other genres to explore. Some people really like to do murder mysteries or things that are more like an escape room in their games with lots of clues and little puzzles to solve. Some people like ones where you fight a lot of monsters and do a lot of combat. Some people like really dramatic stories about magic and the nature of the universe. That you can do anything. It's these big stories that you end up telling as a group together, where the game master leads it and each person playing controls a character and makes choices for that character. Okay, that's what it is. And we tried it here at Expium, and it was so successful. It was incredibly fun for us. And I think what worked about it when we did it was something you could do on Zoom. telling stories and gathering around with each other and turning on our cameras and playing this game that's just naturally like narrating back and forth to each other. It just worked. It was a good icebreaker in a way we didn't expect, and it was meaningful too. So anyway, these are some of the things that people said after we started doing this. We started using it for onboarding, which I loved because I love meeting new hires. And it sort of brought people to life in a way that you wouldn't see otherwise. As they're getting to know each other and learn the ropes, they also start to trust each other as a cohort, which meant they were learning from each other better. And they actually had developed that kind of like freshman orientation feeling of like, no, we're in this together over Zoom, which was a big deal. And we really appreciated that for our culture. But yeah, even for teams that were close, it was successful because it helps them work through any chemistry issues they have as they sort of fine tune their dynamic, and they get to solve problems in a way that's low stakes and creative. It's all imaginary. It still feels exciting and real, but it wasn't the same, important client problems and difficulties that they would have. At the end of the day, it's all fantasy. So when you're done, you're done. You go away. It doesn't carry home. It's not going to affect your job security. Yeah, I like the one in the bottom right too. Our team had an extremely positive experience working with Josh. I've learned a lot more about my team, the importance of working together. And I think that was really true for this player because he was kind of quieter, and it was really nice. He I think he started to learn like how would I describe it? I think he just learned who his team are as people a little bit more, and it became easier to interact with them. Anyway, so yeah, these were all really great. So we found huge success with it. So we started being like, all right, well, how could we offer this to the world? Here you've got sort of the dungeon master and the different players. These people are more listeners, and D&D is much more participatory. But a simple scenario might look like the dungeon master describing entering a cave and seeing a red glow at the end of it, and then the players saying something like, okay, well, I want to quietly walk into the cave and see what's glowing in there and try and, sneak in. And the dungeon master would go, all right, well, when you sneak in, this is what happens. And so it's kind of a call and response thing. So trust is, at the end of the day, about being vulnerable. Super hard to do. I'm trying to do it right now. And being vulnerable means showing who you really are with your flaws or what have you. And that can be like a daring and difficult experience sometimes. And one of the players that I had really enjoyed the game because it felt like she could put herself into the character that she created. And so when people responded positively to that character and were able to say like, hey, we like you, it was really reinforcing for her and made her feel like a stronger part of the team. So what she said was, I enjoyed the fact that I was able to put myself in my character's shoes. Even though there's a lot of storytelling involved in the development of each character, I think our own personalities are meshed into it. My character really resonates to who I am, and it was nice that everyone on the team supported that and accepted me. I think that's kind of huge. We all have parts of ourselves that we might not like or that are more difficult, and it's possible in this game to put those parts of yourself into the character and make it so it's you, but it's also not you. And that step removed makes it easier to feel accepted and to accept others, and just to accept yourself. Sometimes the games that we play would just go on for 3 sessions and they'd only be so deep, but I have some groups that I've been working with for over a year, and it's incredible to see how people have grown and learned to trust one another on an even deeper level. So what can you do if you're interested in one of these? Well, this is basically how it works if you want to get a 3-session package. That's what this outlines. But we have 3 different options, and I'll make sure to go over each of those. But I'll start with this, since this is what we have on the screen. So first, you'll talk with me and you'll schedule your sessions. And players will receive packages that have dice and snacks and all sorts of cool stuff in them. And then when we actually meet, we'll do introductions. We'll get to know everyone, share a story about who we are, and get an introduction to the plot. We'll do a working agreement, build characters, and go over the mechanics. And then we'll have 3 sessions, and each session is just an exercise at the beginning to get into character, and then we'll all play. And then at the end, we'll do a retrospective. I've changed my work a little bit so that I only do a retrospective after the second and third sessions. The first one is just totally as is. But retrospectives are really great. It's just some time at the end of the session to debrief about what worked, what didn't work, and start to talk about what we learned from playing together. At the end of these 3 sessions, I schedule a time with the team lead or the scrum master to talk one-on-one with them about what did you learn, how did that go, and talk about some things that I could recommend or see that might be valuable for the team. So that is how you do that. So that's the 3-session one. We also have a single session that you can book. So it's a single 4-hour session. And that includes exercises at the beginning and kind of a truncated version of the introduction section. And then we play for 4 hours, and there's a retrospective at the end of that one. Or you can do what I call a lunch and play, which is an hour-long one, which I'll do for free for you so you can get a taste of what it actually feels like to play this game. And I can do this for groups of up to 6 at a time. And the lunch and play is just a super quick, incredibly fun hour, and it's just a very short scenario that's meant to be engaging and fun and give you an idea of the value that you could get out of this. If your team takes to it and if they like it, it's a great way to test the waters. So reach out to me if you're interested in any of those. I love working with clients on it. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming to the talk. I'm going to check the chat and my notes and make sure we didn't have anything else we want to cover today. But at Expium, we offer plenty of different training courses, consulting offerings, and custom development of services. We do have a programmers that can help you with your solutions in Jira and its different add-ons. We're really here to make Jira work for you because I know it can be a real beast. But yeah, that is it. This is out of date. All right, if you want to look up other services, you can go to expium.com and go to our training section. All the things in blue are free. Green are classes and are things you can book, trainings. And down here is our upcoming events at the bottom. And with these, you can sign up for anything with sign up is just something you can, that's public. Actually, I'm not sure what the difference is. Sorry, apologies. Some of these are public, like Provoking Productive Conflict is going to be the next talk that I do, which is about how to take a team that has trust and use that trust to have really good conflict on your team. And that can be very useful. But that'll be on the 20th. So feel free to sign up for that here, or you can do it on my LinkedIn. And yeah, that is it. Let me check and see if we have anything. Oh, wonderful. So we have a giveaway today. Okay. Our giveaway today is going to be either a 1-hour lunch and play or a 4-hour experience, your choice, for you and up to 5 additional teammates. And that is going to be for Gayula Farkas. I'm so sorry if I butchered that. Yeah. Gayula, congratulations. You're the winner. Kali Braun will be reaching out to you. And you'll receive details about your prize, but nice. Congratulations. Well done. All right. And with that, I'm not seeing any other additional questions here in the chat. Thank you all for participating today. This has been really awesome to share with you, and I hope you've gotten some value out of it. Yeah, that's it. All right, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.